Hey there, mommy friends. Welcome to the Mental Beauty Podcast. I'm your host, Logan Washington, and after the break, we're going to have some real talk about some real situations with a real mom. All right? Talk to you soon. Welcome back, mommy friends. Today is a hard one to share. I will be honest with you. This is how my kids got temporarily taken out of my care and how I got them back. That is hard to talk about, but I wanted to be real with you guys from day one. So here we go. So about 2 years ago or so, my life was drowning and spinning out of control in front of my very eyes. It didn't even become clear to me that it had gotten so out of hand at first until it was absolutely way too late. And I want to be 100% honest with you guys. This has to do with betrayals and mental health and how the world can come towards you for a better result sometimes, and how sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. So, with that said, going forward, about 2 years ago, the fact that I was in such a dark place, I didn't care about anything. And I can't say I didn't care about anyone, because the only people or anything at all I cared about were my children. And knowing what I know now and not being in it anymore, looking back on it, I can see how someone would have looked at me and be like, you definitely were not thinking of your children. But I was. At least I felt like I was. I was in such a dark place that I didn't care about my own hygiene. I didn't care about the cleanliness of my home. I didn't care what anyone said to me. I didn't care about leaving the house. The only thing I cared about were if my kids were clean, fed, and taken care of. That is all that mattered to me at that time. And it was so hard to think of all of the ways that I had failed them, so I thought I had failed them. And I grew to learn that that wasn't true, that I had not failed them at all until I allowed myself to go into that deep, deep depression. And I know a lot of you out there will say that it wasn't my fault, that depression just hits. And that is true. That is very, very true. Depression just hits sometimes. And it definitely did just hit me. I can't even tell you when I started feeling like I was going to get depressed around that time, because I just remember what it was like coming out of it. I only remember what it felt like to realize where I was and not be where I was, if that makes sense. So, as I said, my home basically had turned into a sea of depression that made a physical form in the way of garbage, trash, dishes, clothes piling up. It was devastating. When I think back on it, it was so devastating that I had let it get that far. It had gotten to a point that only one place in my home was clean, and that was the bathroom. We only had one bathroom at that time, and it was always clean because that is how I would keep my kids clean. That is where I would keep them, looking nice. So the bathroom was clean so that I could clean my kids and everything in there would be clean. I didn't have to worry about the kitchen because I no longer cooked. I was always eating out. At that time, I was lucky to have my mom who was helping taking care of me. And so I would just make a decently clean space for my kids to eat. And I was so close to withering away because I would not eat then either. My mother would have to force me. I wasn't really living at all. I was just in a haze all the time. And I was just running on autopilot. When I could see again and feel like a person again and saw the landfill that was my home and my life, and I knew then I needed to take action. But waking up wasn't easy. It was a process. I was depressed for months and months. So my house had fallen way by the wayside. When I finally did wake up and saw my home in the condition that it was in, and I actually saw what I was living in and what my kids were living in, and I could actually see clearly again, I knew I needed to take action and make things better for my kids. And unfortunately, or shall I say maybe fortunately, because things did kind of work out, spoiler alert, should I say fortunately, for me and my kids, someone with a vendetta against my mom was visiting her. She did not have the vendetta at the time, but she was visiting my mother, and at that time, and she and my mother got into a spat a little bit after that, and she had seen my home, and not because she was concerned for my kids, but because she was angry at my mother, she called Child Protective Services on me, CPS. And I'm going to take a very quick break here. For one, I have to put a commercial here. It's giving me the warning. And I need to reconvene. So I'll see you guys in a moment. Hey, welcome back. Time to go on with my story. I will never for the rest of my life forget that day. I had finally, it took, I want to say like a week, I had finally almost gotten the kitchen back to looking like a kitchen again. I had just gotten the girls home from getting their hair done. I was cooking lunch for them, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. I was feeling pretty good about my progress. I had them dressed so nicely. I was dressed decently well, not too well, because I was trying to clean up the landfill that was my home. I was making small progress, but progress nonetheless. And then that faithful knock on the door. I'll never forget it. There are no words to describe what I was feeling when that woman said she was from CPS and needed to see the state of my home. I immediately felt as if someone or something had wrapped around my insides and started squeezing me to death, killing me from the inside out. I could not breathe. Everything around me looked a whole different kind of foggy. And even though everything sounded like I was underwater, I managed to try and bargain with this woman for alternatives so that she would not remove my children from my home, so that my kids could stay with me. For her not to take them from me. It didn't feel like it at the time, but I was one of the lucky ones. She allowed me to pick someone of my choosing, of my choice, to watch my kids while I got my home in working order. And myself, too, I later learned, had to get in mommy working order, if that makes sense. My mom told me she had a friend who was already a foster parent. I knew this friend. She was a close friend of the family, or at least a really close friend of my mom. And she was already taking care of 2 foster children that she had had for years. The social worker assured me that this was not me losing custody. I did not lose custody of my children, and that this was only temporary. I have to admit, though, at first, this was not any form of comfort to me. This was not any form of relief to me. All I kept thinking is that there's this small chance, this small opportunity that my kids could be fully taken away from me for good, for kaput. I felt, I don't even know how to describe to you what all of that felt like. I just thought